Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Huddle. Today, we have a very special episode as we announced some very exciting news earlier today, where H100 has entered into a letter of intent to acquire Future Holdings and then, or by that, establishing a presence in Switzerland. And very briefly, the letter of intent means that H100 and the shareholders of Future are aligned on the main commercial principles of a transaction, while still some formal steps are waiting before an final agreement is signed. So from here, we all agree that we want to do this deal and we agree on the principles, but the transaction is still pending some formal documentation, due diligence, and some necessary corporate approvals before we hopefully can sign and close the deal within a couple of weeks. So what we are announcing today is about strengthening H100's position within Bitcoin treasury and also within capital markets in general. And it's a very important step for us to establish a platform in Switzerland, which we think is Europe's most important financial hub. So, with that introduction, I think it makes sense to hand the word over to Richard and Mark. Many of our followers, of course, know your names, but it would be very interesting to have a brief introduction on yourself and what you have been building in future.
Hi. Well, thanks, Johannes. Thanks for the intro. It's great to be here discussing this transaction with you. We're very excited about it. As I think a few people that followed the future trajectory knew, we did struggle with the sixth listing because it was rejected because of our lack of operating business and our limited track record and a requirement for audited financials for the last 3 years, all of which H100 have. And so this allows us to at least see through what we initially started with Future, and H100 have all the benefit of the work that has gone into the positioning of Future into the Swiss stock market, which is obviously at six, one of the most liquid stock markets in Europe and indeed in the world, in the top 10 liquidity in the world. So we're pretty excited about what this means for H100 and their shareholders. If you wanted me to give a quick introduction on myself, Richard Byworth, I've been in traditional investment banking for around 18 years before moving into digital assets, where I co-founded and then listed a company on NASDAQ, and in the digital asset space, and during that process became a Bitcoin maximalist, which was quite a culturally difficult thing to run a crypto company when you're a Bitcoin maximalist. But then moved back to Switzerland after stepping away from that company as they sort of got involved with Binance. And then I really focused on Bitcoin. I joined the board of Relay, which is a Bitcoin-only app here in Switzerland. I'm an advisor to Jan3 on the nation state advisory side. And at my previous firm, Seize Capital, I built the largest fund of crypto hedge funds denominated in Bitcoin, which had assets under management of $500 million. Marc Seize, who is with us today, suggested when we were in Vegas together that we launch a Bitcoin treasury company to address the opportunity in Switzerland. And a lot of people had suggested this to me. And I remember when Marc finally came to me, he said, "We have to do this for Switzerland." And I was like, okay, yeah, I agree. And so that sort of was really the germination of Future, and where it came from and where we are today. So I'll hand over to Marc.
Yeah, hi everybody, and thanks Richard for that quick intro. Marc here. Similar to Richard, spent 20 years in finance, started my career as a trader in derivatives, and then moved into private equity, which we've been doing for more than 15 years now, supporting entrepreneurs, venture companies, both in Europe, in Asia, where I still sit on some of their boards. And since 2014, have been involved in Bitcoin. And then together with Richard, been trying to develop, I would say, crypto assets, but more importantly around Bitcoin, and where we've launched several strategies around creating alpha around Bitcoin and other crypto assets. And very excited to have started Future together to exploit actually the opportunity we see in Switzerland, which we think is a unique opportunity worldwide, actually, in a market a number of Bitcoin treasury companies are trying to get into, because it is actually not easy, but everybody sees the opportunity. And so we're very excited to team up today with Sander and Johannes and H100 and to build something quite extraordinary.
Thanks for very good introductions, both Richard and Marc. And I think could you maybe explain a bit further what you have built in Future and what platform is Future and what do we hope to continue to build on within H100?
Yeah, sure. I mean, a lot of the work that was done within Future was preparation of two things. One, to list on SIX, and so a lot of documentation preparedness has been done there. And the other key thing is really design a very aggressive capital markets strategy, ranging from the moving strike warrant, which is essentially a synthetic ATM, benefiting from the liquidity that is available on SIX. A put underwriting plan as well as Bitcoin denominated convertible bonds, which I recently rolled out with the other company that I advise in the space in the UK, Connecting Excellence. So it was really those two prongs, getting ourselves listed in Switzerland, all the preparation that was done there, but also, as well as those capital market pieces, having the partnership to implement the moving strike warrants, which is something that we hope to be able to pass on to H100.
Thanks. And yeah, I have to say that we are very impressed of what you have built in a short time frame in the Future, and we are obviously very exciting to how we can build on this going forward. And Sander, you are the founder and today the executive chairman of H100. It would be very interesting to hear your thoughts on the LOI and the transaction in general.
Yeah, so sometimes you are lucky, and I would say in this case we have found a very, very interesting opportunity to team up with Future. I have known Richard for quite some time now. I have learned a ton from him, and we have over the last year we have talked a lot of back and forth of different ideas. And what I'm particularly impressed by Richard and Marc and the rest of the team in Future is how prepared they are for institutional adoption. H100 has done a lot in the high net worth individuals to family offices, but what this could bring us is to the next level, which is the institutional level, and also the experience needed to attract institutional capital. So for me, this represents an infrastructure play, and giving us the opportunity to combine the Nordic commodity history with Swiss banking, which in my opinion can create some very, very unique opportunities in the Bitcoin space. And that's why I'm so excited about this transaction. And I think it's on a structure that benefits all the previous shareholders in Future, but and even more importantly from our side, I think it's a very good deal for H100 shareholders to it's a good deal for the H100 shareholders. And what people need to see here is the platform and infrastructure and potentially the people we bring on board. That's where I think H100 will benefit the most. you already raised significant capital. You proved yourself in the market. It was on, I don't know if you want to tell a few words, Richard, about what happened, like on a very brief level. But what I'm very impressed by the team. They executed at a very rapid speed, brought in great investors, great infrastructure. So for me, this is a great opportunity in a special situation that I personally think it was very good that we acted on.
Yeah, I think the important thing for people to understand is that we raised the capital extremely quickly. We did so at a 1.3 times MNAV. And so, you know, big investors in this space obviously paying for the Swiss opportunity when at a time where MNAVs were not really showing any premium, we managed to achieve a premium even having not listed. And when it became clear, so maybe to tell the story entirely, we went to the exchange to check how it was going to be, and we needed 3 exemptions. 1, having an operating business, because our operating business was very, very light. 2, to have been within operations for 12 months. And then 3, to have audited financials for 3 years. Now, obviously, the latter one doesn't really line up with the second one, but the latter one is often exempted anyway for listing companies. We went to 6 and said, look, we need essentially an exemption for all 3. We walked them through the business and what it was that we wanted to do, and how these companies work. And actually got 6 to the point where the management team signed off, gave us the green light, and the exchange regulator actually also gave us the green light on the exemptions as well. So the next phase was to go for a formal approval to the issuance committee. Now, the issuance committee, in the entire history of SIX Exchange, has never once not given approval if all exemptions have already been green lighted by both the regulator and the business. This was the first time in history that they chose not to follow the advice of the management and the advice of the regulator within SIX. So we had a very prominent bank, chief legal counsel chairing that committee, and a very prominent second bank in Switzerland, being the chief counsel of that bank, being the deputy chair of that committee. So it gives you a type of understanding of what sort of people were on this committee and where perhaps their allegiances or motivations lie. But unfortunately, it meant that the exemptions were rejected. So we had a situation within our terms that we had to be listed by April, and there was no way that we could find a way to get listed by April in the current construct. And so we opted to return investors their capital in form of the Bitcoin that we purchased with the capital that they'd provided us. And so that then left us at the end of last year with a company with no employees, because we actually exited the employees as well and exited the investors. So the overall business that was bought today is essentially all of those things that were built in preparation for listing on the Swiss market, and obviously a lot of goodwill with the investors that participated, because everybody was extremely happy with the way that it was dealt with, and everybody was very clear. I would say 90% of investors were very clear that they want access to Switzerland when it comes. And so our view was we find a way to get someone to be able to access Switzerland and then give the investors that possibility to then re-participate at some point.
Thanks for the detailed and honest explanation, Richard. That's I think that's very interesting for everyone in our community to hear. And I think it brings us on to some Q&As we have got, or questions we have got during the day after we released the news. And the first question, maybe it's for Sander, maybe it's for Richard and Marc, but it's what are we actually, or H100 aim to acquire with this transaction, Sander, because it would be interesting to hear, does Future hold any Bitcoin, any cash? Are we primarily acquiring infrastructure, market access, or what's the strategic rationale for the transaction?
Yeah, for us, this represents an opportunity to enter into Switzerland with like a one-stop shop solution. Most of the infrastructure is already there. We are buying IP from all the listing documents, every preparation they did. We believe this is a faster way to execute, but also a better way to execute because speed is critical in this industry, and we have had a pretty tough quarter, and now we see a little bit different market environment where execution speed is critical. Here you get access to all the infrastructure you need and an optionality for H100 to go into the Swiss market and take that market position, which I think is very, very attractive. You hear Taylor is talking over and over again about the Swiss market and how the general investor are yield starved. Here we get access to multiple people with 20 plus years of experience that might join us in the future to build on top of their experience is is a unique position and opportunity for H100 to use the momentum we have and the capital base we have to accelerate that progress.
Totally agree. Yeah.
So what we are buying a company with which I think represent one of the most interesting platforms to build further on. It's a small amount of cash, and we are buying some of the equity from the existing shareholders. All the Bitcoin are returned back, but in my opinion, I think it's an opportunity, as Richard also confirmed, now that most of the investors has been positive to say we are open to look at it if someone is entering Switzerland again. And I think it's no better name and names to do it with than the team around Future.
I totally agree, and I also wanted to mention that H100 aims to be the Bitcoin treasury company for institutional investors that want to allocate to and have Bitcoin exposure. And with Richard and Marc in Future, it brings a lot of credibility and also the network effect. And they really know the Swiss market in and out, which I think is a huge value in this transaction. And I think the next question we have got is, as we mentioned in the press release, Sander, the transaction is proposed to be that the consideration for the shares in Future is in H100 shares. So we have gotten a lot of question on how this transaction would impact our share count and also the existing shareholders.
So it's communicated that we are paying up to 600K, where up to that around 50% is remaining cash in the company, and we are paying that in shares. And some comments is that we are doing that on an MNAV below 1. But for us, the rationale behind doing something like that is that it's a small amount. It doesn't impact our liquidity, and we think that is one of the things we need to have in-house, and it's an opportunity that will benefit the MNAV for the long term. By having this infrastructure, access to this market, I think we have the opportunity to deliver a premium to the MNAV over time if we execute on the plans that was established in Future and with the people we might onboard.
Thank you. And I think it brings us over to my question on why do H100 want to pursue this transaction if it don't immediately increase our BTC holdings? You have touched upon it, but maybe a bit a further explanation.
Again, I think this gives us the institutional infrastructure and access to a market that we haven't had access to before. And we think that this is what we need to raise more capital and make the flywheel work again. And more importantly, having access to the credit market, which are the most interesting in the world, and therefore being able to deliver more Bitcoin yield for our shareholders over the next quarters and years.
I would just probably add there that I think any investor that understands this space has had it well flagged through Sailor, but of their own intuition anyway. The fact that the fixed income market is the state that it is in Switzerland presents a massive opportunity for the first mover in Switzerland. And I think this allows you to fast track into the Swiss market, into SIX, most importantly, which is, as I said, the 10th most liquid stock market globally, to be able to be there and start providing digital capital solutions to the most yield-hungry investors in the world.
Very interesting. And continuing on that thought, Richard, you two have worked in the Swiss markets for many years. What do you think is the most unique things with the market, and do you think Switzerland is ready for a Bitcoin treasury company?
I'll defer to Marc there, as I don't sound Swiss. I am Swiss, but Marc is the true Swiss banking family.
Yeah, we're all Swiss here now. We're living all in Switzerland. But yes, I do come from a seven generation Swiss family here of entrepreneurs in Switzerland, and some of my forefathers have formed the late Credit Suisse, but we've taken a lot of I would say lessons learned from banking. I think what is interesting in Switzerland is, as Richard mentioned, but also our colleagues here from H100, is a unique dynamic of the Swiss market, with obviously the low interest rates, but the fact that there is very little access and ingenuity around, I would say, fixed income or other cash solutions or yield solutions in Switzerland. Most of them park money into real estate or real estate derivatives or any other form of fixed income, I would say rudimentary derivatives. And there's not many corporates offering, I would say interesting high yield products denominated in Swiss francs. And I think this is where, as much as, we've heard before, Switzerland can be conservative. Actually, the regulator is quite innovative when we think about, what Switzerland has done in terms of infrastructure for the blockchain community, or even, the Bitcoin community. You've all heard probably of the Crypto Valley, which is where my partner Richard is based. So Switzerland has been quite avant-gardist in that manner. So I think we will welcome, I would say, pretty, adamantly, Bitcoin treasury companies coming with, I would say, innovative yield solutions, which will be taken up by the market and the institutional market here, which is very much, pension fund heavy, but also insurance companies heavy, will be looking to diversify their current holdings into something, I would say, more innovative. So we are quite, I would say, excited about the opportunities ahead. And there's not many who can unlock that from both, I would say, a business partnership perspective, so network, but also from a just, technical perspective of executing those strategies and building them for the institutional market. And I think this is where the combination of what, H100 brings, together with the skill set of what, Future has built, and obviously the relationships we have in the Swiss market, will provide, I would say, a very strong and powerful combination.
Thanks, and we share the same excitement. And you, Sander, you have been living in Lugano, Switzerland, working and trying to bridge traditional finance with Bitcoin, let's say Bitcoin finance, for 3 years now. Do you share the same view on the Swiss market?
Yeah, for sure. And what's quite unique with the Swiss market is that you have multi-generation track record, which also means that it's a little bit harder in Switzerland to access that capital without a history. And I think that's one of the major benefits of onboarding people with track record already established for decades, is to fast track into these conversations that H100 can directly from. So I 100% agree with Marc, and I think again this is a very, very interesting opportunity for H100 to pursue, and I'm very happy that we are at this stage, and I'm very much looking forward to see how this deal is going and the progress we can achieve.
Agree. And this last fall, Sander, we announced a project plan called Project Svalbard, and we have gotten some question on whether this was within the plans or within our plans. Could you comment on that?
Yes, so one of the special project was tied to M&A, and we saw the need for consolidation in Europe. We have already looked into multiple ideas, but when we saw an opportunity to do M&A with a public to private transaction, which are way simpler than a public to public transaction, and especially when you can buy a unique team like this, it's not only about consolidation but also acquiring the right infrastructure and knowledge. So M&A was part of that plan. I'm very happy that we are here now, and but again, it's still on an LOI phase, even if we all on paper agree. But I'm very optimistic that this is going to go through. But you never know.
Great. And I think we have actually covered most questions we have had. So I want to just ask all three of you, do any of you have any thoughts to share or any reflections before we wrap up?
I think that the opportunity speaks for itself, as we've covered. I think, you guys understood very quickly the investor hunger for Switzerland, which was really sort of the foundation of our conversations as we started to approach this subject and get to the point of LOI. And yeah, I think that definitely doesn't change. I think people really understand that the opportunity here is exceptional. Switzerland has somewhere between $700 and $800 billion bond market, which is very significant. And even a very small percentage of that can be very, very meaningful for a company like this.
Yeah, and I would like to add that what need to be there for an M&A to work is the personal connection, and that we share the same vision and the same ambitions. And I think the personal connections was absolutely here in this within this group.
Absolutely.
So with that, I think we can wrap up. As I said, this is on an LOI stage, and we are now moving into trying to get the final agreements ready as fast as we can. We need to do a due diligence on both sides, and then we hope and aim to have the deal done within a couple of weeks if everything goes as we hope for. So by that, thank you for watching, and have a good evening.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care.